Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started? And what did they do to stay there? What did they continue to do to be in that leadership lane? And today, oh my goodness, we have a special edition. We're doing a worldwide ERC recap with my special guest, Jack Jampel. Jack is the HR Senior Manager of Global Mobility at Stryker. I've known Jack a long time. We just got back from Worldwide ERC. And Jack, I'm glad to have you on the show. How you doing?
Great. Thanks. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to it. Got back from Vegas, not after having a couple of issues flying back, but everything worked out at the end. So,
Oh my goodness. Well, they say what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, but we're going to bring it back to to our audience today. What went on in Vegas for the Worldwide ERC GWS Symposium, and as I was thinking about this interview, I started reflecting on when did I meet Jack Jampel, and I want to say it was at a Worldwide ERC conference, and I believe it was in Dallas at about 10 years ago. It was kind of a regional forum. I met you at one of the roundtables. Do you remember that being in? I think
yeah,
it might have been Grapevine.
yeah, I remember the ERC. I don't exactly remember where I met you, but I definitely remember that. And I
Yeah.
can't believe it's been 10 years.
It's time has flown. And of course, the last 5 years, we've gotten to know each other more. I'm so grateful during the 2020 pandemic, we were trying to figure out how can we have meetings virtually. And you raised your hand, said, hey, I'll be more than happy to come in. And you were one of our panelists for one of our virtual meetings. And I've admired you for a very long time, your incredible wisdom. And so I'm so excited to have you on the show. Let's just kind of kick this off. What did you think about the Worldwide ERC conference? We had a pretty good attendance, didn't we?
Yeah, it actually worked out very well. I think they had probably more than they anticipated. Yeah, you know what? It was just like the industry had this thirst to get together. It's been long overdue, and our industry, we're very social. So I think the opportunity was incredible. That, along with they gave a lot of free registrations for corporate. And I think that's the other thing that made an increase on the corporate side. So I was in corporate roundtable, and there were quite a few people there. But yeah, everyone you talked to and everyone you saw, there was just this camaraderie, this friendship of people that they haven't seen for, close to 3 years probably. So I thought the venue, they did some changes, a lot more networking, which is, at the end of the day, that's what these conferences are about. You can talk about the educational sessions and you can talk about the speakers, and they're all good, but without the opportunity for networking, it doesn't work. So they really did an excellent job in providing more networking opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Networking, building relationships. I always talk about the importance of building relationships outside the workplace, and that's the place to do it. Hey, I had a list of the conference topics, and I was just curious if you could pick one or two as I'm going to share these. And I'm just curious, like as a corporate leader of mobility, what resonated with you? I'm just going to read off a few of these. Of course, you talked about the public policy forums, the relocation management talks, immigration, lots of immigration, of course, the mortgage, the moving and storage, the housing,
Yeah.
technology, sustainability. And I want to dive into that for sure. Digitalization, the war on talent, DE&I, the transferee experience, stress and assignee experience. There was a little bit of talk on travel, customization, and just building a better relocation program. I was just curious, like as a corporate member, when you see those topics, what topics kind of jump out at you?
I've been in this industry for so long that a lot of the topics you're talking about, I have heard, I've been involved in. And I think what's gotten to me or more around when you hear people talking about employee experience,
Mm,
that area. Now you're starting to hear sustainability, DE&I. You're starting to hear a lot of buzzwords that start to come out a lot in these topics and panels. So those are the areas. I think employee experience, you have sessions on these, but you're going to get answers from me that you may not get from anyone else. But if you do the right thing for
Mm,
employees, that's my rule of thumb.
hmm
There's no policy, or there's no, outline or guideline on how to treat employees better. Do what you feel is right. So when I see these programs that start to try to bullet point different things, I really wonder about, the value of something like that.
I appreciate you sharing that. And we're definitely going to take a dive into that. Hey, I want to kick this off. For those who don't know Stryker, I was just curious, or wondering if you would just share a brief highlight of Stryker. How do you serve your customers?
We are customers are number one to us. We help improve patients' lives,
Mm,
and when they're in hospitals, the outcomes of their surgeries and things of that nature. We're in the orthopedics field, medical, surgical, even neurotechnology and spine. We're known for the artificial hips and artificial knees and hospital beds, but we're a lot more than that. It is amazing what our engineers come up with on a annual basis that you would never think of. I mean, robotics is amazing right now.
mm,
Robotics is really taking off. And we're named number 10 by Fortune as world's best workplaces. So
mm.
yeah, we became number 10 this year. So we've jumped a few. So I think I'm proud. I'm really proud to work for them. And they are really out to improve patients' lives. Yeah.
I love that. When someone says improving patients' lives, I just immediately think about purpose. I think about a meaningful career. And then you added on, but there's more. You said there's lots more. And it's got to be energizing working for an organization that continues to innovate and look for ways to continue. You talk about the employee experience, the customer experience. We're talking about the patient experience, and to be able to work for a company. I just love that. Hey, of course, I've known you for a long time, but I bet there's some things I don't know. And for our listeners, I bet you there's some things they don't know about you. I would love for you to kick us off with the Jack Jampel story. Like, where did you grow up? And how in
Yeah,
the world did you get into HR and mobility and leadership?
I do have a unique story, and probably not many know it, but it definitely has impacted who I am. And what I mean by that is my parents were concentration camp survivors. And we immigrated to the US when I was 2 years old with nothing, obviously, growing up in New Jersey. So, they had such a huge influence me, not so much on what they said to me or more or example setting or anything like that, but more of I think how I felt, growing up in a life of guilt, almost like, seeing what your parents went through. So I think it just formulated my life in this way, in giving back and being strong and being a supporter. They provided me that opportunity to have a better life. Okay. And, my dad used to work all night long. He never came to baseball games or anything like that. So I had a very different life that most people don't know about me. And I think that's really what got me going, is that part of it. And then, as far as career aspirations, it just started to happen. I went to college, obviously, but my career is backwards in a way that I went through HR into senior HR leadership positions with a major pharmaceutical company. I was there for 20 years, and Pfizer acquired us about 12 years ago. And that's when I got into mobility with Stryker. But I had a lot more senior jobs. I was an HR business partner. I was in compensation. I was in finance. So a lot of what you hear from me is because I have the background. A lot of times I'm going to stand up for the company, okay, because I know what they're going through. We talk about working from home, and I've been saying it, and it's starting to happen now, is that the employees were in control, okay, after COVID, and everybody wanted to work from home. As soon as the economy starts turning, and it is right now, and you're starting to see layoffs, you're going to see companies, in my opinion, starting to require people to come back to the office. So, all I'm trying to say is that I have a background in the business where a lot of mobility people, that's all they've ever done is mobility. And so a lot of what I say is more of, of my experience in the business with layoffs, with finance, with budgets. I understand budgets. So that's kind of my background and how I got into HR.
Listen, if you are listening right now, get out your pen, get out your journal. You need to be taking some notes. You're going to get some incredible wisdom. I have so much here. First of all, concentration camp survivors, you got to be like so proud today, right? I just love that and how that has helped shaped you. And I get the part about your dad worked at night. He worked a lot, right? And my parents were entrepreneurs. So they came to my games, but my older brother, they weren't able to go to all of his games. They were just getting going. So I resonate with that. And I'm so grateful for you sharing that. But I want to dive into this. I like how you said, my went through my career backwards. I love how you talked about all your experience, but I want to just, for those listening, maybe they're in mobility, maybe they're in another area in HR, maybe they're just a business leader, but you talked about knowing the business, and that's what's helped you. And you understand the different pieces of the business. I'm just curious for those listening. When I took my certification, I remember talking about, hey, you've got to know the business, right? They didn't say you've got to know HR. You've got to know the business. What's a way or a tip you might share for those listening that say, you know what, I need to do a better job of knowing our business? Where would they start in your thoughts around that?
Yeah, one area that I constantly hear about, and I always say to myself, what makes us qualified to
Mm.
even do talent management? What makes us qualified is if all you've done is global mobility, what makes us qualified? Okay, I've been in talent management, I've been in recruiting, I've been in a lot of areas, and they have specialists that do these jobs. I go, it's not just a word that you can throw around. We want to be involved in talent management. So I think it's getting involved in the company, in their talent management program. Okay, you always say getting a seat at the table. You have a seat at the table, just ask. Okay.
Mm.
So if you truly want to get involved in talent management, then, learn from folks in your companies that do talent management. And it's not as simple as, oh, we know that person's not going to work out by the way they were interviewed during the mobility process. That's not enough. So I think there's areas and companies that you can learn in. They have different programs, whether it's lunch and learn programs or whether bringing in a speaker to talk to the mobility. How many people have brought in a talent management manager to speak to their mobility people?
Mm.
Okay, if you
Love
really
that.
want to see the table. So, yeah, I think internally you have to look for these things and not just say, that I can do it, so I should just do it.
I love that. I love all that. And write down this question. You're listening, write down this question. What makes us qualified? What makes me qualified? When you said that, I immediately went back to when I got out of college and I joined a moving company. They had a policy that if you're going to be in sales or you're going to be a manager, you had to start on the trucks. And I remember being on the trucks thinking, I've got a college degree. Are you kidding me? I'm packing boxes. And here I am, career 25 years later, and you can't buy that experience, knowing that. And of course, being operations dispatch, and then later a coordinator, and then in accounting, and then all in these different areas. And now, of course, in sales and marketing. I love that. What makes us qualified? I just wrote that down. That's absolutely fantastic. Hey, let me ask you a question. I always like to ask this question for those that, you've been doing this a long time and you're very good at it. Was there a moment when you found your lane, you said, you know what, I love serving in this capacity in business, or were there moments?
Yeah. I think it was more in my pharma years. I definitely thought I'd retire with this major pharmaceutical company.
Mm,
But with the way things worked out, it didn't work out that way. I was on a really great lane of growth and helping people and just well-rounded in that company. So it's really, it wasn't like I said, oh, I want to be a global mobility
mm,
specialist. It just happened that that was one of my responsibilities when I was at the pharma company. So I fit in at Stryker since they were looking for a global mobility person. Um, so what I do now is try to help others, in global mobility with the experience that I have in HR and finance and things of that nature.
yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. It feels good when you kind of have found that purpose, an area where you can really serve. Hey, I always like to ask a question before we get into the ERC recap. I want to ask a question around mentorship. You are a great mentor to many, whether you know it or not, whether it's on social media, the things you post, being at a regional meeting, being at a worldwide ERC conference, sharing from the stage. For me, I've watched you and I've learned from you. Have there been some mentors, some people that have helped you get to where you are today? And if there were, maybe share maybe a couple of things that made them great mentors.
Yeah. Mentors it's a word that's used very flexible, very, you're not even sure what a mentor really is. Okay. And we use it so easily, but yet we impact people's lives if we're truly a mentor.
Mm,
Okay. And to me, I never had a mentor. Okay. I had relationships.
mm,
Okay. I had relationships with individuals that taught me things. Okay. But it wasn't a let's meet once a week and write down here, this is what your goals are and this is what your objectives are. That type of mentor I did not have. My mentors were relationships throughout my career, knowing those individuals who being around those individuals that helped me the most. Okay. But not a formal mentor program. And I have an issue with formal mentor programs
mm,
because I think that's more of like checking off a box. A lot of companies have mentorship programs, and what qualifies someone to be a mentor because they signed up. You're impacting people's lives. It's not just a career. So I think it just has to be very careful. I've heard people who are mentors giving bad advice,
mm.
that have never been in the business. All they know is mobility, and they're giving advice on other topics. So I'm really careful with mentorship, and I don't mentor people. I have relationships with people. Okay. If you want to call it a mentor, then that's fine. But I don't meet and have them fill out forms and report back to me. That's not the types of mentor I am. And that's why you said you've learned a lot from me. I've never mentored you, but I guess I am depending on how you define mentorship. It's really relationships.
I love that. I love that. It is at the end of the day, it's all about relationships. I love what you're talking about is you're just basically saying, hey, I'm here modeling leadership, what has worked for me. And if it works for you, then great. I'm so grateful to be able to do that for you. I had a guest on the show early on, David Windley. You may know him. He's a former chair of SHRM, and he talked about mentorship versus sponsorships. And I thought that was very fascinating because he said, for him, it wasn't really about mentorships. It was more about sponsorships because mentors can do like what you're talking about. They can kind of give you some insight and see all that. But sponsorships can, getting sponsors in the organization, they can help you move things through the company, whether it's maybe it's a candidate through the company, or maybe it's your career path, or maybe it's a project that you're trying to get through. They can sponsor that for you. And I thought that was very interesting. Hey, let's talk Worldwide ERC 2022. Again, it was great to be back. We talked about the program. One of the things that I wanted to kind of kick this off was I thought it was interesting. There's always a word that sticks out anytime I go to a conference. So when I went to National SHRM, the big word was empathy. It was just so bright. We all talk about empathy, and it's so important. But for this conference, for me, the word that really shined brightly was sustainability. And it really kicked off with the chief sustainability officer for the win. I just thought that was fascinating, him sharing what they're doing in Las Vegas at the win. Talk a little bit about sustainability. Did that shine bright for you? And what are your thoughts around that?
Sustainability is very important. There's no doubt about that. Okay. It's a matter of to what level do you take it? Okay. It's a matter of how big of a program do you really have, or how small of a program you have. And here's why I say this. Right now, you've seen all these consultants popping up on sustainability. Okay. And companies are paying millions of dollars, bringing in these consultants to tell you where are those areas that you can possibly, become more sustainable. Now, there's the big areas, okay, that you can do that, but it costs money, okay? And at the end of the day, these companies have a duty to the shareholders, okay, to also have them in the back of their mind, okay, to make sure that whatever money they're putting into this is not impacting their bottom line. So here's where my business piece of this comes up, okay? I was in a conference and the consultants were saying, well, if less people would drive to work, then that's one thing that, would help in your sustainability. But you know what? You have to take into account, that's easy to say, but from a business perspective, does it make sense? Can you do your business in that way? So these are very easy things to, pick and say. So I think the sustainability, like I said, is very important. It's on the top of people's minds right now. I think, you're having companies with sustainability as, departments and things of that nature. And here comes my personal, and I'm not getting into politics here, but I'm going to be honest, okay? What happens to this effort if the parties change? Will sustainability be as important? I'm not going to answer those questions. I don't know. Okay. So it's something that, has always been in the back of my mind is it's very important. But as we saw, what we thought was important and parties changing totally flip-flop. So it'll be interesting, depending on what happens on sustainability, how that comes out from that perspective. But I think it's very important. I'm going to keep saying that, but I do think that the business needs to look at their bottom line on initiatives, and does it make sense to do it from a business perspective?
Yeah. I whenever I talked earlier about how I've learned so much from you, I think that's one of the things I've learned is you ask a lot of good questions that make you think. And I think that's what you're basically asking here is, I'm not here to give you the answer. Just be thinking about like that question and that perspective. I absolutely love that. One of the things I did whenever I got back, I got with our president and I'm like, hey, what are some things we're doing for sustainability? Because I'm like, I need to know this, and we always talk about the basics, right? Recycling cardboard and doing some of those things. But it made me think, I guess, is what I wanted to share here. And I bet you there's some people that went to the conference that wrote down that word and it made them think. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we're all going for. Hey, well, you participated on some panels and really enjoyed all of the panels that you were on. What was your favorite topic?
Yeah, I mean, I was on two panels, both on Friday morning. I'm not sure how I got into that, but 9 and 10:30. And the first one was, with dealing with exceptions. So, again, that's really near and dear to my heart. And I'll never forget when I came into Stryker and centralized their program, they had in their policy how to deal with exceptions. And I thought that was so backwards. How do you put in your policy dealing with exceptions?
Yeah.
It's just backwards thinking. And what I've learned that is that if we've learned anything from COVID, okay, is that we shouldn't hide behind our policies and precedent setting and not afraid to take risks to do what's right.
Mm.
Okay. Our companies every day are taking risks. Okay. It's just to what level, okay, is your risk tolerance? So I think that's what it's really about. And I keep saying is get back to doing what's right. And I'm not afraid of setting precedent. That's not, I'm not going to hide behind that if it's the right thing to do.
And I
So
love that, by the way. You were with, I think, Chris Chalk and
yeah,
Michelle Velasquez, I want to
yeah,
say, in that particular one. I actually wrote down a quote. You said, if we learned anything from COVID, it was focus on doing the right thing. And I love that. As a matter of fact, I put some takeaways on my blog at brucewaller.com. You talked about every situation is different. You talked about some of the exceptions being made were extended storage just because of the housing market the way it is, maybe some home leave options. And then, of course, you talked a little bit about the 50-mile rule. I thought that was interesting because I was actually going into that thinking, okay, now, Jack, I want the black and white. When do we stop making exceptions? But there really is no black and white. Every situation is just so different. It's like you said, it's doing the right thing. What's our culture? What's our cost factor? And looking at everything, right?
yeah. I mean, you've heard me say in other probably panels or whatever is that the company never pats me on the back when I save $100 or $200, but when a move is going wrong or going good, that's when I hear about it.
Mm,
Um, I'm always looking at if that exception was going to be raised, how is it going to turn out?
mm,
Do we need to go through a long process to get to the same result? Because you've lost the employee experience if you make it tough to do these things, then you've lost the employee experience, even if they get that exception. So
I like that. I like that a lot. I appreciate that. And then you were on another panel, and it may be one of my favorite panels of the not just the conference, but of all the conferences. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I believe it was you and Vinny Valverde from UPS and Tanya, and
mhm.
and moderated by Daisy with the
Yeah,
ERC. She was fantastic. Talk a little bit about that. I would love because the topic was what makes relocation managers tick. I thought that was interesting. What were your thoughts about that particular conversation, and what were maybe some takeaways you maybe thought about when you left the conference?
yeah. Yeah, this topic is one that I submitted when they were asking for topics.
Oh,
So I submitted it as a panel, and then they came back to me and asked it would be a great closing session. So would I do it for? And I said, yeah, absolutely.
of course. Yeah. Hey, would you do it, by the way? Of course I would. Yeah. Right. Love
Yeah,
that.
so that's why we did it for
Be careful
closing.
what you volunteer for.
Yeah, exactly. But I had two great people that, again, are not afraid to talk the talk and tell it like it is. And I've always said that you're not going to get any value if we tell you what you want to hear just to be nice.
Hmm.
Okay. We want to be kind. And the difference between nice and kind tells you something, even if it's not good for you. Okay. That's being kind.
Hmm.
Being nice is just telling you what you want to hear. And that's the difference.
Hmm.
So that's the approach that we've taken with this is that a lot of the questions that started coming up were about technology, and you're starting to hear a lot about technology, and it's a really bothersome area for me because the things we've asked for year after year do not seem to get any traction. But yet there's things and companies that are coming about with solving a problem that we don't have.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is that so many times a company will, um, try to do it backwards. They come up with a product and then try to tell you what your problem is that you probably never even had. Okay. Instead of working with corporates and, doing some kind of think tanks and thinking, about before you go and put all this money into these new products. And what I mean by the IT solutions is something that, you know, seems so simple, okay, but no one ever wants to do it, is why are we still not scanning the boxes when they come into the house? Why does somebody have to check off on a yellow sheet 300 boxes, which we know that they don't do? Okay. But if it's not on there, then if you write a claim, the insurance company is going to deny it because it's not on there. And who wrote these? They're written by the driver. So, it's things like that that seem so simple that would be such a great thing for employee experience. Okay. Or the other one that I constantly hear about is to be able to know where your things are. And I know why you don't want to do that is because sometimes the things stay in another state for a while or whatever. But that's something that I think employees would love to know where things are. An app just like we have today, we know where people are. It's not impossible to do, but it's those simple things that would make the employee experience better. Okay, that we don't look at. We don't look at. Um,
I love that. I was actually thinking about how just some of the things that you talked about really challenged my thinking as well. And we can put it up on the board, but until we actually take action and do something about it, nothing really ever changes. But I was thinking about the box check off. So we do have some computerized, but you're talking about like you see. I mean, Benny was on the state UPS. They're scanning things. They know where things are at. I mean, do things get lost? Yeah, probably, but not very often. I mean, the numbers are probably very, very low, but you're right. I mean, and then I think Tanya talked about maybe one system for all suppliers. And I love how you also shared, hey, maybe it's time for you to start a think tank, or, let's get together and let's start solving some of these problems. I always talk about how, to develop influence in an organization, you got to define problems, and not just a problem, but the right problems, right? And that's the thing you're talking about is, hey, look, there's a lot of things we can talk about, but let's go look for the problems that we can solve, and let's talk about those. And maybe if we do, and we get the right people in the right time, we're going to be able to solve something. It's going to really make a difference. Love that.
yeah, I mean, we work in silos because it's easier to make decisions that way. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier if a household goods company is just working with their internal, but then they want to call me in and get my opinion on things. I've seen things come out, from RMCs. I'm saying, why did they produce this? Why are who is asking for this? But it was done in a silo. It's job security. I'm sorry, but that's really what it is. Job security, and they got something over the hump. Okay. But you ask, what value did it bring to us? And I'm not going to get into what that report is, but there's things like that we scratch our head and say, why did they produce that? We've been asking to centralize all our suppliers. And I don't have a problem if the suppliers came back and said, you know what, it's just too expensive. It's not cost effective. But you don't even come back with that. Say that. And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. But instead of ignoring these things.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. There's probably some mobility leaders that are listening today and trying to maybe pick up a tip. Maybe they're new in the industry. What would you maybe share a couple of things that, I don't know, some value you've got from participating in some of the different areas you've participated in? I know you're a past former president of the Delaware ERC regional chapter. You've been involved in Worldwide ERC for a long time, and I think you participated in a lot of different regional groups. For let's just talk about, for some of those who may be new, or maybe they're just thinking, it's time for me to take our game up a notch. What are some things that mobility leaders can do to learn and grow like you have?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is to continue to be involved. Don't wait for people to ask you, raise your hand. If you have an idea, come up with an idea. Don't be afraid to, bring that idea forward. I'm going to give you an example. RDC had their conference the day before ERC, and I used to be on their advisory council. I'm not anymore, but I just went there and was listening in the panels. No one invited me or whatever, but I started adding a lot of value, and they really appreciated that from the corporate perspective. Okay, so it's things like that. Don't necessarily wait for the invitation. It's more of get yourself out there, become more visible. Okay, is what I would say. And then the second thing is don't necessarily think mobility is your total career aspiration.
Mm,
I say this to a lot of younger, folks in this industry. It's a great industry, mobility, international, immigration, learning that. But if you're with another company, there's other opportunities. Okay. And just because it feels good, just because we're very social and we have a lot of parties and a lot of events, this does not necessarily mean that that's the end of your career. So I always say that, learn as much as you can, but don't think it's got to be the end of your career aspirations.
that's great advice. I appreciate you sharing that. I do want to ask you one more question for those listening. If they were, they're trying to shape their mobility program. You obviously have a large mobility program. You've been doing it for a long, long time. Understand it well. For someone who's trying to they're trying to shape a mobility program. Maybe they just started moving folks and they're wanting to continue to elevate that. What does a successful mobility program look like? Just give me a couple of things that you look at your program and say, hey, these are a couple of things we do to make sure that that's what success looks like.
Yeah, there's one question, on surveys. I hate long surveys that we do nothing with the information. Okay, let's be honest about it. We ask 100 questions and we do nothing with it. There's one question on our short survey that asks, if you had to relocate again, would you use this company again?
Mm.
And that's the key, okay? Because even if you had issues with that, we have a lot of people that would still say they would use them again because of how they were treated throughout the process. Okay, so what I would say to individuals that are starting programs is to not overcomplicate relocation. When you start to overcomplicate, it gets to be a tough job. And what I mean by overcomplicate is I'm not a fan of the point system. I don't know what benefit that brings. Okay, the point system. And a lot of times you can get caught up in this and spend more time than trying to understand how do you give the employee the best experience. And at the end of the day, the number one thing is household goods.
Mhm.
That is the number one thing. You can tell me all you want about apps, and you can tell me all you want about different reports or whatever. But at the end of the day, your household goods moves makes or breaks your program. So we have preferred relationships. We have, I know directly who my folks are. And I think that's the other thing I would say is go with some kind of preferred relationship. Now, that's hard when you have a small program. I understand that. But it doesn't mean that you can't look at these other ways of doing things. Keep it simple.
I love that. Keep it simple. I love that advice. This has been so good. Oh my goodness. I told you the time's going to fly. I mean, we could talk, I could dive into this for hours, but I do want to ask one last question before it's time to accelerate to finish the show. And I always like to ask, and I especially want to hear this from you, Jack. Have you ever been given any advice? Like it was just so good. Maybe it's early in your career. Maybe it was from your parents, or maybe later in your career. It was just so good. You just find yourself sharing it with others.
Yeah, here's the great advice I got from my dad. Before I went to college, we had a family bakery business. So I was a baker since I was like 13 years old. We had a family bakery business. And I used to work in there every weekend, every day off. I was in there working and learning and, learning how to be a baker. And what he said to me one day was this. He said, you know, I don't want you to be a baker. I don't want you working at midnight, okay, and getting up every day like I do. But what you're learning from this, he says, I want you to go on, work for a corporation, and get into a corporation. But what you're learning from being a baker is that if anything goes wrong while you're working for a corporation, if you get laid off or if you get fired, you will always have the ability to go into a bakery or a supermarket or anything as a skilled baker. That was the advice he gave me.
I love that. That is
Yeah.
fantastic. I remember when I took the job at Armstrong, believe it or not, it was 19 years ago. I remember I had not gone into a sales role before. I've had every other role. And I remember thinking to myself, if it doesn't work out, I can go work back in operations like we were before, but I got to try this. And as you shared that story, I was like, that is fantastic advice. And I appreciate you sharing that. A baker. I love that. Do you do any baking
Well, you
today,
know what?
especially around the holidays? Here we are. It's almost
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
I'll send you a picture. I made my own wedding cake
That's
35 years ago. But the more interesting thing is, 5 years ago, I made a replica for my daughter. She allowed me to do. I went to a bakery and asked them if I can use their facilities. And I did a replica. It was bridges and fountains. So I'll have to send you the picture. It was very touching. And on the table, we had my wife's wedding gown was draped on the table. So it was really, really cool. It was very touching. So I still had it in me. It's like riding a bike. I can still decorate cakes.
That's fantastic. I love that. I make chocolate pudding pies around Thanksgiving. So, man, this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed this conversation. There's just so much more, and I put a lot of my takeaways on, like I mentioned, on my website at brucewaller.com. You can just go to my blog and you can see some of my takeaways there. Hey, I want to shift to It's Time to Accelerate. Jack, as we kind of finish the last part of the show. First question I always like to ask is, are you a book reader or do you like listening to podcasts?
You know what? It's crazy. I wish I was, but I'm not a book reader. I'll read more business books
Hmm.
to learn, on investing and on managing and things of that nature. That's what I kind of read. But I'm not a big book reader, to read any kind of my favorite book though, as crazy as it sounds, is The Giving Tree.
Hmm.
I have always loved that book.
Hmm.
There's just something about that by Shel Silverstein. That's my favorite book. It's short, but it really tells a story. Yeah.
I will put that in the show notes. The Giving Tree. I don't think I've read that. I'm gonna have to check that out. That's fantastic. Hey, here we are. We're a couple weeks away from Thanksgiving, 2022. What are you grateful for?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just so grateful for, to have the family that I do with two grandkids.
Hmm.
And, we just are really enjoying life. It's all about family. It's all about, helping my daughter getting through these tough times because she works full time. So my wife does a lot of babysitting, but it's the kids. We love the kids. We love the family. That's really what I'm grateful for, is family and all of us being healthy.
Hey,
Yeah.
outside of work, you have your grandkids, but you have anything that like any hobbies or anything that just like really energizes you outside the workplace?
And I wish that I could tell you I did. And that's when I always, it's something I have to do before I retire, is find what that is. Today it's really just trying to make differences in people's lives.
Mm.
And I think you get it in from my LinkedIn posts. It's as far as better helping others, and that's really kind of where I'm at.
Well, you are definitely helping a lot of people, no question. Hey, I would like to ask this question. It's probably my favorite question I like to ask to in the show. Jack, 10 years older, 10 years older. He's knocking at your door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
I think he's going to tell me, you know what, that you still had more to give, so it was not a mistake to delay your retirement.
Mm.
It's not, my retirement is not by age. It's by how I feel. Am I adding value? And that's what's going to drive, the value. Once I feel like I'm not adding any value, then that changes. So that's kind of where I would see it, is that it's not a mistake to delay retirement.
Love that. That's a wise 10-year-older Jack Jampel. Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show today and just sharing your wisdom. Again, there's so much to talk about. If somebody wanted to, like maybe somebody heard something and they wanted to connect with you, is there a way for them to connect?
I think the best way is LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Is the best way to connect, and send me a message there, and be glad to connect. I always, anyone reaches out, I always, get back to them. So I think LinkedIn is probably the best.
And I like how you said, hey, include a message in there, because it helps so much whenever you get this LinkedIn connection and it says, hey, I heard you on Life in the Leadership Lane podcast. I'd like to connect and share something, maybe a takeaway. And that just makes that that much better. And again, listen, I'm so grateful this Thanksgiving season for you, what you are and what you have done for the mobility industry. And I'm just so grateful for you coming onto the show and just sharing your wisdom and of course, your friendship over the years. It means so much. So thank you so much, Jack. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, having me on, and maybe in the future we can have another one with some other different topic, a direct topic even. So thanks again, Bruce. It was great.
Yeah. Look forward to it. Hey, I'll talk to you later, Jack.
All right.